Hi there, I'm Maura. And a few weeks ago, my sister asked to host her baby shower in my backyard. Just the backyard, she said. Small, sweet, nothing invasive. I said yes. Of course I said yes. But what started as one simple favor turned into her redecorating my house, taking over my fridge, and eventually telling me I wasn't even invited. How does someone get erased from their own home without ever being told to leave? Have you ever said yes to something that slowly became a no you couldn't speak? Let me know below. No. After the divorce, I didn't just want quiet. I needed it. Not the lonely kind, but the kind that let me hear myself again. That's why I bought the house in Asheville. It wasn't big, but it had enough corners that held sunlight and enough silence that didn't feel heavy. So when Delaney called with her usual syrupy tone and asked, "Would it be okay if I hosted a little baby shower in your backyard?" I said yes without thinking twice. She emphasized just the backyard, like it was nothing. No guests inside, no decorations in the living room. Just a garden party, she said. Low-key, sweet. It had been a while since we shared anything that felt like warmth. Maybe this was our chance. Maybe I was naive. A few days later, I got another message. "Hey, Maura, do you think you could clear out the garage too? Just a few boxes for decor stuff. Temporary." I stared at the text longer than I should have. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for details. I just shifted my own boxes. Childhood yearbooks, old photos, journals I hadn't touched in years, into the attic, out of the way. Funny how small things feel harmless when you do them one at a time. The next morning, I walked through the house and realized how many things had moved slightly. Not gone, just adjusted. The throw pillows were stacked in a closet. A table was missing from the foyer. Delaney had brought over lanterns and crates labeled "Baby Shower Do Not Touch" in thick Sharpie. I didn't remember agreeing to any of this, but I didn't remember saying no either. I found her measuring the patio with a tape measure one afternoon, phone pressed to her ear, laughing with whoever was on the line. She said ambiance 3 times in 2 minutes. I stood by the kitchen window and watched her place citronella candles like they were centerpieces in a magazine spread. A neighbor walked by and waved at us. "Big party coming up?" Delaney answered before I could. "Yes, my baby shower. Super excited." I smiled and nodded like background noise. She didn't glance back. And for some reason, that's when it clicked. I hadn't heard her mention my name once in any of the planning. Not to me, not to the guests who dropped by. When she introduced people to the space, it was always "this area" or "we're setting up here," never "Maura's home." I tried to laugh it off. I told myself not to read into things, but the feeling lingered. This subtle pulling of thread after thread, like something unraveling without me realizing I was the sweater. That evening, I stepped into the garage and stared at the cleared-out wall. The emptiness echoed. I closed the door slowly behind me, and for a second, I felt like I had just locked up someone else's house. It was still my home. I told myself that, over and over, but it was the first time that didn't feel like enough. The mailbox was heavier that morning, not in weight, but in silence. I sorted through the usual stack, grocery flyers, a utility bill, a coupon I'd never use, but no envelope with pastel print or embossed letters, no invitation. I checked twice, then a third time. Still nothing. At first I told myself it didn't matter. I knew the date. I helped plan the menu. Maybe it was just a formality, or maybe Delaney was trying to save paper. That sounded like her. Practical, performative. Still, something in me tightened. A thread pulled a little too far. I texted her. "Hey, I think I missed the invite." She replied within seconds. "Oh, don't worry, the invites went out. All handled." No emoji, no apology, just finality. That should have been enough, right? I told myself I was being sensitive, but when she came by later that afternoon for our decor run-through, she referred to the space as the venue. Not your home, not Maura's backyard, just the venue. "We'll manage this corner for the welcome sign," she said, stepping over my rug like it wasn't there. "I want this layout to feel fluid, you know?" She spoke like an interior stylist giving a tour to a film crew. I stood across from her, nodding as if I understood, though I wasn't sure I did. I wasn't angry, not yet, just displaced. Not by force, but by language, by omission. When her friends showed up with gift bags and coffee, I greeted them with a smile. One of them, a tall woman with cherry red nails and expensive shoes, looked around and said, "This place is stunning. Is it yours or your husband's?" Delaney laughed before I could answer. "Let's just say we're lucky." Lucky. I was standing there holding a tray of lemonade glasses, and no one looked at me. Not even out of politeness. I wasn't introduced. I wasn't addressed. I was background. The tall woman clinked her straw against her cup and said, "You're going to have the dreamiest shower ever." And Delaney beamed like a bride on a movie set. It was flawless. When they stepped out back to check the seating chart, I stayed behind in the kitchen. I leaned against the sink and stared out the window. The dining chairs I had assembled last winter were lined up by the door, waiting to be moved for flow. They were mine, bought secondhand, cleaned and tightened by hand. But in that moment, they looked like props. And I realized something that made my throat burn. It wasn't about the invitation. It was about the fact that nobody thought I belonged in my own home. Delaney hadn't said my name all week, not once in front of others. And I couldn't remember the last time she looked at me like I was someone she shared blood with, not just a resource to tap when it was convenient. I came home to find a different house, not broken into, not vandalized, just rewritten. In soft pinks and beige ribbons. The backyard looked like a bridal magazine exploded. Pastel tulle draped over the trellis. White chairs, not mine, arranged in rows. A giant wooden sign leaned against my fence, reading "Welcome Baby Brooke" in perfectly looped calligraphy. No call, no text. No, "Hey, hope it's okay we set up early." Just strangers in matching polos, walking through my space like it had always been theirs. One of them waved at me like I was the neighbor, not the owner. I didn't say anything. I didn't know how to. I walked inside and found my favorite porch chairs stacked in the hallway. The air smelled like peonies and chalk dust. I stood there and let it wash over me. Not in a good way. Later that evening, I opened my laptop to clear out some work emails. A new subject line caught my eye. Final invoice Lemon and Sage events. I clicked, assuming it was spam. But it wasn't. $1,423.25, billed to Maura Trent. My name, my address, my email. Delaney hadn't even asked. She hadn't mentioned she hired anyone, much less put it under me. I sat there, blinking at the screen, rereading the numbers like they'd changed the fourth time around. She hadn't just taken the space. She'd claimed the cost, too. I opened a blank message. "Hey, did you mean to have the invoice sent to me?" I stared at it for a long time, deleted it, typed again. Saw the invoice. "Should I forward it to you?" Deleted that too. I poured myself a glass of wine instead. Walked into the living room. The vase on the coffee table, the one I'd bought in a flea market in Charleston, was gone. In its place was a ceramic rattle centerpiece tied with ribbon. I whispered to myself, "This isn't my house anymore." The sentence didn't shock me. The calm in my voice did. I didn't go back to my email. I didn't reply to the invoice. I just sat on the edge of the couch, watching string lights flicker across the patio like they belonged here. Like I didn't. The fridge caught my eye. It was covered in baby-themed magnets. Ones I hadn't bought. Ducks, clouds, cursive lettering. My grocery list was missing. Not just pushed aside. Gone. She didn't ask. She didn't even hesitate. Because she knew I wouldn't say no. That's what made it worse. The message came while I was folding laundry. Casual, like a recipe link. "Hey, wear something soft and pastel, okay? No black. It'll feel too heavy with the decor." I read it twice. It didn't feel like a suggestion. It felt like a cue, a role. I stood in front of my closet longer than necessary. My hand hovered over the navy dress I always wore when I needed to feel strong. Structured shoulders, soft neckline. I passed it over, settled on a pale lavender blouse that matched the napkins Delaney ordered last week. That night, I ironed it while wondering when I'd started dressing for someone else's camera. By morning, the house was buzzing, not with family warmth, but with clicks of clipboard pens and the flutter of streamers being stapled to fences. Delaney floated from one corner to the next, orchestrating. She glanced at me once, then nodded. Perfect. Now no one will clash in pictures. That was it. Not thank you. Not glad you're here. Just approval, like I was part of the staging. I smiled, said nothing. Again. Guests started to arrive around noon, voices lifted into the air like colored balloons. Women with flawless curls and designer sandals stepped into my house as if they were stepping into a photo booth. One wore a deep emerald dress with gold accents. Another came in crimson. Delaney squealed, "Oh my God, you look amazing!" I stood at the edge of the room, my lavender blouse suddenly dull, like a wallflower costume I hadn't realized I was wearing. She never told them no black. Just me. And it hit me. It was never about blending in. It was about erasing contrast. She didn't want me to match the theme. She wanted me to fade. The compliments kept floating. No one looked at me, not even by mistake. I was standing in my own entryway, holding a tray of lemon slices like a silent caterer, invisible except for when something needed to be refilled. I adjusted my sleeve, smoothing the fabric like it would help me remember who I was. The laughter carried from the kitchen to the patio, a wave I wasn't invited to ride. I stepped into the hallway. I didn't know what I was walking toward, but I knew it wasn't back. I had just finished aligning the cutlery when she walked in. Delaney didn't knock. She never did. She floated through the front door in soft cream and peach tones, carrying a bouquet of balloons and her usual curated smile. Everything about her looked effortless, like she belonged wherever she stood. I had hoped today would be different, that maybe after the weeks of small slights and quieter disappearances, we'd land on something that resembled family. I was wrong. She looked around, nodded once as if inspecting her own stage, then turned to me and asked, "Where will you be hanging out during the shower?" I blinked. "Here?" Her smile stayed, but her voice sharpened. "You're not on the guest list. It's just close circle." Close circle. My chest didn't drop. It folded. Quietly. Neatly. She moved past me and started fluffing tissue paper in the gift baskets, humming like the conversation never happened, like I hadn't just been dismissed from my own home. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I walked into the backyard and sat down on the old wooden bench by the shed. My hands felt strange in my lap, like they didn't know where they belonged anymore. I pulled out my phone. Victor's name hovered at the top of my favorites. I stared at it, thumb hesitating. Then I tapped. "Hey," I said when he answered. "I'm being told to leave, from my house, for her party." There was silence on the other end. Then, "I'll be there in 15. And he was. I heard the car door shut before I saw him. Calm steps across the porch, the front door opening without a knock. Victor stepped into the kitchen like he was walking into a room he'd been in many times, which of course he had. Delaney turned, her face catching on itself. Victor didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "This is her house," he said, steady as stone. "She's staying." Delaney opened her mouth to argue, but he cut her off with a look. The kind that comes after long nights and longer silences. The kind that said, "Not now, not again." She stepped back, and I walked in behind him. Past the catered table, past the balloon arch, to the cake I had helped choose and pay for. I stood beside it. I didn't speak. I didn't sit. I didn't move. Delaney didn't yell. She didn't fight. She just stared at me like I had ruined something she thought belonged to her. But it wasn't hers. It was never hers. The last delivery came late. Delaney had ordered extra decorations, she said. Backup table runners, more candles, last-minute aesthetics. She texted me to let the delivery guy drop them off in the foyer, said she'd sort them out tomorrow. I didn't think twice. I signed for the boxes and started stacking them along the hallway. One of them broke open. It wasn't the fragile sticker that caught my eye. It was the edge of something flat and wrapped in old craft paper, tucked under a pile of pastel ribbon. I pulled it out slowly, heart already bracing. I knew that size, that weight, a portfolio. I peeled the paper back and saw it. A charcoal sketch I hadn't laid eyes on in over 20 years. A girl at a windowsill, chin resting on her palm, hair tangled in light. My signature wasn't on it. Delaney's was. A memory slammed into me like wind through an open door. Senior year. A scholarship I'd worked toward for months. I remember staying late after school in the art room, fingers smudged with charcoal, reworking details, layering shadow. The night before the submission deadline, I had laid the pieces on the dining table to dry. The next morning, they were gone. Delaney got the award. Our mom said it didn't matter. Your sister's. What's hers is yours. I let it go, or I thought I did. I pressed my fingers against the corner of the sketch, where her name had been written on a label. The ink had faded, but it was still there, still screaming. I didn't cry. I stood up, closed the box, and carried the portfolio to the dining room, where Delaney had set up the guest sign-in book and a stack of pastel pens. I laid the portfolio on top of the tablecloth. No note, no dramatics, just evidence. When she arrived later that afternoon, she saw it, paused. Her face didn't change much, just the eyes, tightening, like something had been lit behind them. She didn't touch it. She didn't ask what it was. She just stepped around it. Like shame itself could be ignored if you didn't make eye contact. I waited. Not for an apology. Not even acknowledgement. Just for something human. But she said nothing, and that said everything. The text came at 6:42 a.m. No greeting, no context, just a sentence that landed like a stone dropped in still water. You really hurt Delaney. Are you okay with that? I stared at the screen, the light of it too harsh against the dim quiet of morning. I placed the phone face down on the nightstand. My breath caught, not because it was shocking, but because it was so deeply familiar. It wasn't just the words. It was the tone. The soft, heavy sigh hidden in digital ink. The same tone my mother always used when something was technically my fault because I didn't avoid it well enough. I didn't move from the bed. I let the memory rise, uninvited. High school, junior year. I had been saving up for a set of literature books for AP Lit. Annotated editions, margin space, the kind that felt like they belonged to someone serious about college. Delaney had a dance coming up. Junior prom, she wanted a new dress. One with tulle and glitter, one she could twirl in. Mom had looked between us and said, "We'll get the books next month." The dress arrived that weekend. The books never did. That was how decisions were made in our house. Not with fairness, but with volume. And Delaney's desires always spoke louder than my needs. I sat up in bed and opened my phone again. I started to type. She lied to everyone. She lied to me. Backspaced. I've let things go for years. Why is it my job to be silent? Deleted. I closed my eyes and hit call. She answered after 2 rings. Hi, sweetie. You've always protected her, I said, my voice steady, even when she took things from me. There was a pause. Then, she's pregnant, Maura. She's going through a lot. Can't you let it go? There it was. Not a denial, just a deflection. I nodded to myself, even though she couldn't see it. I'm not asking you to take sides, I said. I'm just asking you to see it. Another pause. Then a sigh so soft it might have been breath. I didn't wait for more. I ended the call gently, because hanging up any harder would have felt like giving her the drama she was already prepared to dismiss. I got out of bed and walked through the hallway. The walls were bare. Delaney had taken down the pictures she didn't like and stored them to simplify. On the floor near the kitchen, a stray balloon had deflated. I stepped over it. There's a difference between keeping the peace and keeping someone small. She didn't just choose Delaney, she chose silence, every time. And now I was done letting it speak for me. It was close to midnight when I saw it. I couldn't sleep. My thoughts wouldn't quiet, and the silence of the house had started to feel loud. So I did what people do when they're trying to forget something real. I scrolled. That's when I found the post. Delaney had uploaded a photo of my kitchen, the one I designed, the one I bled over emotionally after signing my divorce papers. She was standing in front of the marble island, one hand on her belly, the other resting on the counter I once painted myself. The caption read, "Feeling grateful for this space. New home, new beginnings." There were no tags, no mention of me, no thank you for hosting or letting her in, just pastel filters and a sense of ownership she hadn't earned. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. I should have been numb by now, but this felt different. This wasn't just taking space. This was erasure. A few minutes later, I got a message. It was from Jules, one of Delaney's perfectly curated friends. "You have amazing taste. Did you really design the kitchen yourself?" I didn't reply. I looked at the tiles in the photo, the same ones I chose while crying in the corner of a Lowe's aisle, back when my name was becoming something I had to build from scratch again. I had traced those countertops with my fingertips like they were a new beginning. And now, they were a backdrop in someone else's lie. I got up from bed, printed the photo and the message, and taped both to the fridge. I didn't add a note. I didn't need to. Delaney came by the next afternoon, holding a box of thank you candles for guests I never got to invite. She set the box on the counter and looked up. Her eyes landed on the paper. The smile on her face slipped for a second, barely, but I caught it. A blink, a small inhale. Then, nothing. She didn't rip the paper down. She didn't speak. I leaned against the counter and said, "If you're going to steal something, at least be brave enough to put your name on it." She didn't respond, just adjusted her scarf and looked away, like the shame wasn't hers if she refused to hold it. I didn't need a scene. I didn't need her to beg. I just needed her to know I saw it, that I saw all of it. She had taken what wasn't hers again, but this time, I wasn't going to let her keep it without naming what it was. The sun came through the kitchen window just right that morning, soft and low and gold. It caught on something I hadn't noticed the night before. Victor's wedding ring sat on top of the fridge. No note, no fanfare. Just that quiet circle of metal, resting like a truth that no longer needed to be said out loud. I didn't touch it. I didn't move toward it. I just stood there for a while and let it speak. It didn't accuse. It didn't blame. It simply confirmed what we both knew, that something had ended long before either of us was brave enough to admit it. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. One message. "I've left. You were right to call me." No goodbye, no apologies, just stillness. It didn't feel cold. It felt done. I deleted the message, not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to keep it. There was peace in that. Delaney never brought it up. Not the post, not the confrontation, not the ring. She came and went that week like nothing had shifted, but something had, permanently. The air between us was no longer tense. It was vacant, like we'd both decided to stop pretending, but neither wanted to start explaining. I watched her from across the living room one afternoon. She was texting, laughing at something I wasn't part of. Her shoes were expensive. Her bag looked new. She had everything, except roots. She looked like someone balancing on a stage she built from borrowed pieces, unsure if the floor would hold. That night, I packed the last of the leftover decorations into a cardboard box, folded the Welcome Baby banner in half, and slid it between two old cookbooks. I didn't throw anything out. Some things you keep, not out of sentiment, but because they remind you how far you've come. I turned off the lights. The living room dimmed to shadow, and I locked the front door, not to keep people out, but to keep myself in, to reclaim space without shouting, to say, "I'm here. This is mine." You don't get to take anything else. Sometimes leaving isn't walking out. Sometimes it's staying in, on your own terms. Looking back, I've realized that sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come with screaming or slamming doors. They come with polite smiles, quiet assumptions, and borrowed words spoken in your space. But healing doesn't always mean walking away. Sometimes it means staying exactly where you are and choosing to no longer shrink. If you've ever felt unseen in your own life, if someone's ever tried to rewrite your story while standing in your home, know this. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to say enough, even when it's quiet. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something like this? What did you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. Whether you're from Kansas or California, drop your city below and let's connect. If this video touched something in you, comment a 1 so I know you're with me. If it didn't, tell me why. Let's talk. And if you want more stories that speak to real life, real pain, and real growth, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's more coming, and I hope you'll be here for it.